The Greenland tussle between America and Europe is only getting deeper. President Donald Trump has threatened tariffs on European allies, while Europe is now scrambling to avert those duties. It is also considering potential countermeasures. This may include a measure that many are calling a trade bazooka. Donald Trump has reiterated his intention on Greenland. He's claimed that Denmark has not been able to do anything to get the Russian threat away from Greenland, also adding that now it is time and it will be done. Trump has been citing the threat from Russia as justification for his demand to take over Greenland. But ironically, Moscow almost seems to be egging Trump on. Kremlin spokesperson declined to comment on whether Trump's takeover of Greenland would be good or bad, or even in line with international law. But he's added that if Trump solves the issue of Greenland's takeover, he's sure to go down in history. It seems Russia is trying not to get dragged into the Greenland debate, and European countries are facing the heat for trying to increase security there. Denmark and 7 other European countries have boosted their military presence in Greenland recently. They hope that it would assuage fears over the island's security. But instead, the move has invited a threat of tariffs. Trump said that he would impose the 10% levy on goods coming in from these 8 countries until a deal is reached for the purchase of Greenland. Leaders from the targeted countries have started speaking out now.
Alliances endure because they're built on respect and partnership, not pressure. That is why I said the use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong. It is not the right way to resolve differences within an alliance. Nor is it helpful to frame efforts to strengthen Greenland's security as a justification for economic pressure.
There is broad consensus among Europeans that further threats of tariffs will weaken rather than strengthen transatlantic relations. They also carry the risk of escalation. Customs duties are usually paid by those in the country where the imports are received, in this case, American consumers.
Donald Trump's threat to impose tariffs triggered an emergency meeting of the European Union ambassadors. At the meeting, the envoys reached a broad agreement to intensify efforts to dissuade Trump from imposing tariffs, but it also called for preparing retaliatory measures should the duties go ahead. Now, reports say that the French President Emmanuel Macron has asked the European Union to activate its so-called Anti-Coercion Instrument, sometimes referred to as a trade bazooka. The Anti-Coercion Instrument has never been used so far. It could limit access to public tenders, investments, or banking activity, or restrict trade in services. Reports state that EU leaders are also considering a package of tariffs worth $107 billion of American imports. The package was prepared last year but suspended after the trade deal with Trump. Sources say that the tariff package appeared to command broader support as a first response than anti-coercion measures. European Union leaders are set to convene an emergency meeting this Thursday as well. Another report claims that Germany could significantly increase the rent that America pays to use military facilities on its territory. The Times reported that while Germany is not considering the closure of American military bases on its territory, it may make the American presence in Europe more costly. The United States Army has over 40 military installations in Germany, including the Ramstein Air Base that houses the NATO-allied Air Command. Will these moves deter Trump, or will they anger him further? Well, either way, Europe seems caught between a rock and a hard place, and Brussels' next move could risk blowing this up crisis further. All right, joining me on Race to Power today is Klisman Murati. He is an economist and founder of Pareto Economics, a global world affairs research consultancy. Klisman, good evening. Thanks very much for speaking with us at WION. I want to start by asking you, how are you looking at this entire situation? Are you looking at it as a potential trade war between America and Europe, or you're not ruling out the possibility of military intervention and therefore military confrontation between NATO allies?
I think Europe would be in a stronger position if they didn't have to rely so much on the US for helping them with Ukraine. But given that Europe is already fighting a war on its eastern front, having something open up on its northwestern front is going to be extra pressure on the bloc to both work with Trump and also fight against him at the same time, which is quite schizophrenic in this international relations sphere we have today. So the Europe really needs to think now, what can it do to deter this? Because the measures that it has in place is more likely to have Trump do something more extreme on top to fight these measures that Europe is thinking of imposing. So what Europe wants to do is effectively sanction in these ways Trump for his actions. But I don't think this is going to change the picture in the slightest for President Trump. He has had his eye set on Greenland from the first day he got into power, but he's had other things on his mind, other policy objectives to achieve. And now it's Greenland's turn to take center stage for him. So he's obviously operating on rules which isn't agreed upon by his counterparts in Europe, but it's really in the court of Europe as to what they do next. But anything they do, I think, will escalate this.
Which is, absolutely right when you say that now the ball is, of course, in the European Union's court. But do you think that the EU can stand up to America? Do you think that the European Union has it in them to economically and militarily stand against the United States of America and Donald Trump?
In short, no, because over the last 40-odd years, Europe's success in its commerce, in its defense, and in its innovation has come in a large part from the United States. They sell into the United States more than they sell into any other market apart from its own. And they rely on the US for defense. They work with US technology partners, and a lot of US firms employ European workers in different sectors. And they are protected, and they are in line with the US agenda on the world, at least until the last few months. So because they've entangled themselves so much and been more of a recipient of US progress as opposed to it being on an equal basis, they are going to find it very difficult to stand up against him, because what can they do that doesn't hurt them, number one, but hurts the United States as well? That is an equation that never works out well, because they haven't developed themselves independently of the US in any major way over the last 40-odd years. So this entanglement has led them to being such close partners, but this also has caused them to be at big risk, because Trump has a very different view on world affairs than his past administrations. And this is going to cause a lot of pressure for the Europeans moving forward.
So it's almost like a wake-up fall for Europe as well, who've been, stagnant economies since the past few years. But if there is a potential trade war between Europe and America, how do you think consumers like you and I would be impacted?
No, it's not going to be good, is it? I mean, it's quite easy maths if you think about the equations. If there are barriers to trade in any given way, then the end consumer is the one that suffers. Inflation goes up in different ways. Unemployment potentially also increases. That means interest rates have to be changed. That means the whole forecast for a country's economic viability in 2026, 27 is going to change. And this is all dependent upon what measures each party takes in this, and not to consider a third actor or a sort of a black swan event or circumstance that can arise in this whole coalition of confusion, I think you'd call it. Because right now it's the US and Europe, but as things go down into the future, maybe with such focus that Europe is paying on both sides of its continent, there could be an opportunity to take advantage of Europe on a third side. So Europe is really at risk here. Their people are at risk, and the economic viability and sustainability of Europe's growth is also at risk.
All right, we'll leave it there. Hopefully, the World Economic Forum will see some sort of stable negotiations coming in. Hopefully, that is, one can only hope with Donald Trump. But I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Klisman, for joining us and giving us your perspective.
Thank you.